This is the story of Piccolo, as told by me, Darius the Green Angel. Alright, now, it all started a long, long time ago. So, this Namekian planet called Namek left his homeworld, crashed on a planet called Earth. We're all familiar with that, but not in the Dragon Ball Z sense. When he got to Earth, this Namekian started having feelings that a regular Namekian would never have. See, what I'm saying is he wasn't familiar with the attitude humans had towards one another. He was expecting, more peaceful type of shit, right? Instead, there was more conflict. People were fighting amongst each other, wars and famine and all this other stuff. All this shit in turn turned him into two entities. Kami, who became the Earth's guardian and watched over things from above. He could see everything going down, basically. Um, as his other half became known as the Demon King, Piccolo. And he ran around, terrorizing people. Um, he and Kami was not strong enough to stop him. Most of the power lied within Piccolo. Kami was more, he had some skills, but he wasn't like Piccolo. See, Piccolo didn't have any reservations about killing a human, at all. He would run around and kill people for his amusement. He was going to take over the planet, is what his goals were. However, there was some martial arts. Nope, there was some there were some martial arts teachers that tried to fight against Piccolo, but they failed until one day Master Roshi and his master actually came and was like, "Hey, we have to seal Piccolo away inside of a bottle for a while." His master, Master Roshi's master, died sealing Piccolo inside of the bottle. The evil containment wave to seal Piccolo away, keep him under containment. Now that he was contained for a while too, and that's cool. As time went on, Earth was, going through its phases as usual. People fought and other things, but there was people there to, keep people right, like Master Roshi. Master Roshi eventually found Goku, and Goku was, in the martial arts tournament a couple times, 2 times. At this point in the story, during the second time Goku goes to the martial arts tournament, tragedy strikes, right? So Krillin gets killed by one of Piccolo's offspring, called Tambourine, I believe. Um, it was either tambourine or trombone. One of them, and that's a spawn of Piccolo's. Piccolo created him. Yeah. Piccolo had evil magic. He was able to do that. These things were basically Namekians, but not necessarily. These things were made from his hatred and other things, more so than his DNA. This was a quick thing he did. He didn't do hold on, I have to tell you the story and shit. All right. So Goku, finds Tambourine and destroys Tambourine for killing Krillin, right? But then Master Roshi runs by what he knew about Piccolo, and that King Piccolo was back, and that this is an actual fucking problem. He told everybody else. Goku was already on the move to find Piccolo. Piccolo found Goku, and he basically defeated Goku. Goku wasn't powerful enough to defeat him, even in his old decrepit state. See, Piccolo was old when he emerged again. Kami knew Piccolo had arrived again, as they have a connection, right? They're kind of like yin and yang of the same, two sides of the same coin. But one is good and one is evil. And he sensed his other half. He was like, "Oh, Piccolo's back. This is a catastrophe. We need to stop him." You know, for him to merge back with me, it's a possibility, but probably not. Um, he's just pure malice and pure hate and everything else. So Piccolo was after the Dragon Balls, knowing that he was older and weaker than he was back in his like prime, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna summon Shinron, the Eternal Dragon, and he's gonna give me my youth back. And then after that, I'll take over the world. And that's what he tried to do. Um, he was able to defeat Master Roshi after Master Roshi was like, I have to put him in the evil containment wave. It didn't work. And then he summoned Shinron and he became younger. And then he took over a city, declaring Piccolo Day and other things. And every day he would destroy another city if they wouldn't bow to him as king. And that's what he was trying to do. See, Goku was training in Corn Tower, and then he went other places to gain, power enough to defeat Piccolo. During this time, Piccolo was, holding down. He took care of that dog who was president of the city. He just got him out of the way, like, nigga, you ain't here no more. It's me. He did that, and then Tien shows up. Tien tries to fight against Piccolo. At this point, Piccolo spawns another child. This child or this person's name is I think it's tambourine or trombone. I'm a dumbass. I don't remember which one it was, but he's a fat one. He's the fat one. It's Drum actually. My bad. He spawns Drum from his stomach, and Drum's a bigger guy, a bigger alien thing, and he fights against him. Bam, bam, bam. But Trombone's actually, or not Trombone, but Drum is fast, and Tien is having problems. Then Piccolo's laughing on the side and, playing games. And he was going to kill Tien, and then Goku showed up. Goku shows up, and then it evens the playing field. Goku and Tien versus King Piccolo. And they were fighting, scrapping with him and other things, but Piccolo was still, like, more powerful than they were. Um, However, these boys were able to push Piccolo to, like, use more of his power than he wanted to use against them. Like, he output way more power than he wanted to. So he got a little bit, more tired than he could have been. And that's the truth. And so Goku got his arm broken, his knee, you know, almost broken, both of them. But then he, found his Saiyan energy and he, tapped into his reserves and he powered up and he got, he sent himself, he sent himself through Piccolo's body. It's in the thumbnail for like Goku during the King Piccolo arc. I used that thumbnail for Goku because I was a dub for Goku. He caught a dub that day. That boy Goku, he caught a dub, yeah. Yeah. He caught a dub that day. But then Piccolo was like, okay, whatever. This, I might be dead, but I'll have my son. And he puked up his son, which became the actual Piccolo we know today. But in Dragon Ball, they were calling him Ma Junior or Piccolo Junior for short, or whatever. Ma Junior for short. This Piccolo, became the Piccolo we all know today as the one that's, fighting with the Z fighters and everything else. He was running around. Kami was aware of his existence and other things. This guy was, doing the same shit his daddy was, destroying shit and like laying waste to shit, like everywhere. However, he had the goal of defeating Goku because he defeated his dad, and he was like, you killed my daddy, so now I'm gonna kill you. That's how it was. You know, and he showed up at the next martial arts tournament 5 years later, and during that martial arts tournament, Goku was on par with Piccolo. Dare I say, Goku was actually a little bit more powerful than Piccolo was, and he was, but it was a hard fought battle. You know, Piccolo ended up destroying the stadium. Everybody was watching in awe. They're like, oh my gosh, if Goku loses, we're all fucking screwed. And, for a second, it seemed as though Piccolo was going to win. he shot a hole through Goku's chest and he like stomped him in the ground and he was like, I'm the winner. But then Goku, he got up and he got up high. He went up in that fucking sky. And then he come down and he's like used his head and he won. A headbutt, to the chest, and he was able to knock Piccolo out of the stadium. Um, Now Kami was like, you should kill this one. He won't stop trying to destroy this world. I know this is my other half. You know, and then Goku was like, you know what? No, I want him to live. So he can fight me again another day because I love having people to fight against. And he was like, you'll regret that decision. And then he left. And then, another 5 years passed. And Goku has a kid named Gohan. And they're, having fun or whatever. And this is the beginning of Dragon Ball Z. Piccolo is starting to be referred to as Piccolo. Not my junior or any of that shit, right? He then he comes in contact with Raditz first. See, Raditz picks up on the strongest power level on the planet, the most powerful. He was like, this scouter reads that there's a power level over here. So he goes over there and he finds Piccolo. And he's like, well, if you ain't my brother, Kakarot, who was sent here years ago, you're some motherfucking animal. So I have to dispose of you. And he did, he made easy work of Piccolo. But then Piccolo later, found Goku. But by the time he found Goku, Gohan had already been snatched up by Raditz. And he was like, yo, this guy is more powerful than you. He defeated me with ease. We need to team up to fight against this guy. Probably. And Goku was like, I guess I can team up with you, you know. And then Piccolo was like, all right, whatever. And then I can tear you to pieces after we tear this guy to pieces. And he's like, yeah. And they go on their way to find Gohan. And Gohan's inside of a, space capsule. The one that Raditz used to get there on. The Saiyan spaceship, basically. And they're fighting against Raditz. And Raditz is, handling them kind of. But Piccolo's like, I have a move that I was saving to use on you, but we can use it to defeat this guy. He said, all right, this is great. He says, I need time to use it. And also, Piccolo got his arm torn off basically by a blast from Raditz. But he was like, don't worry about it. I can regenerate it. Limbs and shit can be regenerated on a Namekian, so I'm fine. And he was like, okay. Goku was like, all right. And he started fighting against Raditz, and then, he ended up getting his ass whooped a little bit. But then Gohan pops out of the pod, and he hits Raditz in the chest, and Raditz is like, what the? This boy, his power level went above everybody's for just a split second. And then Goku was like, I have to hold down for my son. I'll hold this guy, and you put a hole through my chest, Piccolo. This is the only way we can win. He's like, do it now. He said no, and then Raditz was like, don't do it. You'll kill him too. You don't want to have your partner die. And then Piccolo was like, I don't care. I wanted him dead anyway. This is the perfect opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, and that's what he did. He killed Raditz and he killed Goku. Um, and after that, Goku was dead. But then they wanted to revive him with the Dragon Balls. See, Piccolo was gonna go back to his ways and shit, right? But then he found out that there was more Saiyans coming to Earth, and Vegeta and Nappa. So he was like, "Damn, well, I can't take over this planet if these people are coming here, and they're actually stronger than this guy was." And we had to like work together to defeat him. So he was like, "All right, well, we'll get the Dragon Balls together and revive Goku, but until then, we will." Um, we will find I'll find Gohan some training. Basically, he would train Gohan, and he would train him into a warrior and shit, right? And he threw Gohan, and he saw that he had like latent potential, and he trained him in the Badlands for like 6 months. and he had to destroy the moon when he was training Gohan because Gohan went into the Ozaro state, the Great Ape form, and he destroyed the moon. And that played a factor for Goku's fight for a little bit, but then Vegeta did some stuff. But um, so then Piccolo was fighting against the Saiyans, right? He had to fight against Nappa. He witnessed Yamcha go down for being careless. Then Chaozu and Tien went down, and then he was like, we have to fight. We have to stand our ground. Without this, if I die, or it's all over. You know, these people probably win, and Goku needs to get here soon, because we'll keep falling, dropping like flies and shit. These guys are actually, powerful, like not like the other guy. And they were fighting. And then he was telling Gohan, use what I taught you, and actually fight. And he was like, no, he just froze in fear and other things. And Piccolo was like, had to protect him. Piccolo had to jump in the way of a blast to defend Gohan. See, Piccolo then died and shit. And when Piccolo dies, Kami and Piccolo's lives are attached to the Dragon Balls, both of theirs. So if Piccolo dies, then Kami dies, and the Dragon Balls go with them. So the Dragon Balls were no longer in use. The Earth Dragon Balls, right? Then Piccolo goes to King Kai's planet when he dies. He's met there with Yamcha and Chaozu and Tien, and they're all in King Kai's world, you know, witnessing everything going on planet Namek. The fights that Vegeta was in, the fights that fucking Goku was in with the Ginyu Force, and then eventually with Frieza. And they heard about Frieza, and if Goku did what he did, is he strong enough to fight against Frieza? And he asked that to King Kai, and King Kai's like, nope. Frieza is still a beast. Frieza's on another level. He's Frieza the Conqueror. He plays game in the universe. Um, he likes to run around and like conquer planets and worlds, and destroy worlds as well. Um, Piccolo was like, well, send me to Namek, wish me back to life, and then send me to Namek. And he had Dente do that. Dente made the wishes happen, and he got to Namek. So then when he got to Namek, he was there, and as he was flying towards where Frieza was, he got met by Nail. See, Nail got his ass whooped by Frieza. Like I don't know, a couple minutes before he got there. Before Nail died, he said, "Here, take my power. Synchronize our energies together. Basically, all the energy I had will become yours, and you'll become a more powerful Namekian." And he was like, "All right, whatever, as long as I have full control." And he did. Piccolo was like, "I feel like the most powerful I've ever had in my whole life," and he was able to go toe to toe with Frieza in the second form, and he was actually, doing some damage to Frieza a little bit and giving him the what for. But then when Frieza went into his third form, Piccolo was just another guy, and like he got walked, basically. Then he went into his final form, and everybody was watching. Vegeta try some shit, and Vegeta, died. Then Goku, they were watching Goku. Um, Goku then got the bright idea to use a spirit bomb. So, but in doing that, he needed to accumulate power from like nearby planets and star systems. This was going to be a bigger spirit bomb than the one they used against Vegeta. He knew that, so he was like, "I have to put my hands up in the fucking air for a while." So Piccolo was like, "I know what he's doing. I need to like make sure I can like fight Frieza for a while and keep him off his dick." And that's what Piccolo was doing. He was like, he was holding down against Frieza for a little bit, um, but it was like a couple minutes, and then he dropped it on Frieza. Frieza was still alive, and he killed Krillin. Then Goku entered the Super Saiyan form, and Piccolo was like, kind of tired, so he passed out. Then, Goku fought against him, and then, they were transported back to Earth with the Dragon Balls. A year later, Goku was the first, or not Goku, Piccolo was the first to sense Goku's presence back on Earth. He's like, or not Goku's. He wasn't sure who it was. He found out it was Frieza, and he was like, "Oh shit, Frieza's back." I don't know how we're gonna hold down against this guy if Goku wasn't able to defeat him. But then Trunks comes, and when Trunks comes, he defeats Frieza, and he fights against Goku for like a little, little skirmish, nothing crazy. But he overhears him talking, and he found out that Trunks was Vegeta and Bulma's son, and he came from the future. He heard the conversation Goku was having with Trunks, and he was like, "I'll keep a secret." I understand that shit is like kind of if anybody heard that shit, it could like compromise your timeline and our timeline alike. So he kept a secret. He knew that Goku was gonna get sick in 3 years, and that they were gonna have to fight against the androids and other stuff. So he was training with Gohan and other things, and they were training. And then the day came, and Goku, like I said, he got sick and other things. They got to get him out of there. And then, Vegeta came to destroy Android 19. But then Piccolo is like, all right, you know, this is, Android 17 and 18. These people are powerful. He got defeated by Android 18 and everything. She was able to clean house with them. But after that happened, Piccolo's like, I know a way I can get stronger, more powerful, so I can take on foes, right? And they were like, what do you mean? And he just left. He went to the lookout. Kami was waiting for him. Kami understood what Piccolo was there for, and he said, you finally come to your senses, that we'll merge back together and be that, Namekian we were always supposed to be. One. Not, one or the other, but we'll both be how we're supposed to be all along. And he was like, yes, as long as I have control during this like fucking merger, it's all right. Because you're weak as fuck, and you wouldn't actually go fight no one. You'll stay up here and watch it go down, you know. So basically, that did happen, and part of Kami was in Piccolo when they merged. So Piccolo was more powerful in other things, but he had a little bit of Kami in him too. So he went back down, and he was a Super Namekian at that point. He fought against the new android called Cell that they weren't accounting for. See, he knew that something was going on. There was like less, people in an area. He was like, this town is like desolate. This usually is bustling full of people and other things. And he witnessed Cell take bioenergy from a human and use it to like power himself up. And that's how he found out about Cell. Now Piccolo, kind of was careless during this point, and as he could have, defeated Cell then and there, um, but he allowed him to get away and shit. With the solar flare, and Piccolo was like, damn. He witnessed him also use Kamehameha, and he was like, now I know that this android has the ability to use all of our abilities, you know, from all of us Z fighters and even Frieza too. Dr. Jerome made an android that was, quote unquote perfect. After he absorbed 17 and 18, that those conditions had to be fulfilled for him to be a perfect being and shit, right? Then, Piccolo was like, well, we have to like stop him from absorbing people. Goku and Vegeta are in the hyperbolic time chamber. I'm sitting on my ass here at the Kame house watching this shit go down, and I'm just like, as Earth's guardian, I'm like, or like protector, I'm like, you know, I should be doing something. But then, guess what? Android 17 shows up with Android, all the androids showed up, except Cell, of course. And he was like, I want to fight against Goku. Is Goku home? And he's like, no, you have to settle for me. And they went to another island close to the Kame Island, and they fought. He was fighting against Android 17. Their fight was like really close. Piccolo had better moveset, but Android 17 had more energy at his disposal. He could keep shooting Ki blasts no matter what. Then Cell showed up, but he looked the same, but he wasn't the same. he had absorbed a whole bunch of cities, so his like power was like, it eclipsed Piccolo and 17's. So he was like, now I can absorb Android 17 once I get you out of the way. Piccolo tried to fight against Cell, but he got dismissed. And after that, he absorbed Android 17 and became imperfect. So almost, perfect form. But Piccolo went back to the lookout. Piccolo was then a bystander from that point on, or just somebody that was, sitting on the sidelines, a bystander. He watched as shit was going down with, everything. Then the Cell games happened, and he's still that way. And he questioned why Goku sent Gohan out there, because he was actually the one to train Gohan more than Goku was. Except during that time in the hyperbolic time chamber, but Goku was like, I trust my son, he's actually more powerful than me. You'll just have to wait and see. And Piccolo was like, I don't know, that's that boy and shit. You gotta calm the fuck down, he could die out there. But then, and everybody was in awe when Gohan went Super Saiyan 2 and he started fighting against Cell. He kicked, or he, well, he was able to, get Android 18 out of, Cell's body. And then he was imperfect again, but then he tried to detonate and destroy the world. But then Goku, he became the hero and he, like, sent Cell somewhere else, to or King Kai's planet. But he exploded there and he came back because a little bit of his gray matter was still in existence. So he was able to like respawn from that gray matter and he came back to Earth. And when he came back to Earth, they were all there waiting for him. And, Gohan was trying to hold down, or he was holding down against Kamehameha, but he was holding back still. So then Goku had to talk to Gohan. And then all the Z fighters were hitting, Cell with Ki Blast, to try to distract him a little bit. And that did help Gohan out a little bit, but not much. It was mostly Gohan's power that was used to defeat Cell, and he, got him out of there. Then 7 years pass, and Piccolo's just hanging out with Dente on the lookout. No real threats around and shit. He enters the martial arts tournament, but he was the first to sense Supreme Kai. See, he knew that Supreme Kai was kind of powerful, but it was more so, not that, but the mystique behind this guy. This guy knew of not just Earth and not just, a part of the universe, but like he knew of all of it. He knew what was going on with like different creations on different planets and other things. He's the Supreme Guy. So he found him and he was like, oh shit, this guy is here. I don't know why he's here at this tournament, but he's a guy that shouldn't be here. So if he's here, there's something going on planet Earth that we ain't aware of. And that was the case. Babidi was trying to bring back Majin Buu, and Majin Buu was a threat. So he told them that, and then Bofovich tried to fuck with it. Well, he did fuck up with Videl, and then Gohan was fighting against Bofovich. Then his buddy came and stole his power, and then they left. But then they went after him, because that energy was going to be used to fuel Majin Buu's resurrection. So then, Piccolo got to the scene, but then Dabura showed up. Dabura spit on him and caused him to turn to stone. Then he was unpetrified after Majin Buu ate Dabura, and he was witnessing as Vegeta fought against Majin Buu, Fat Buu, and Vegeta almost, defeated him, but unfortunately, bounce back is a thing and recoup is a thing for Majin Buu, right? If you can't destroy all the vapor, even like the Buu particles are still there, then he can respawn from those particles, and he did. And then Piccolo was like, damn, you tried to be a hero and other things, but you just still couldn't do it. It's a sad thing. And you were also, a bad guy kind of in life. But like when you go somewhere, like in the afterlife, you'll probably go to hell. So you won't even have a body. So I kind of feel bad for you that you had to die and shit. That's what he said that Vegeta's a dead, lifeless body. But then he had to stay and help Goten and Trunks learn the Metamorian fusion. and he took them and he was training them, and they were able to pull it off. And then he trapped Super Boo inside of the hyperbolic time chamber with him and Gotenks in there. So him and Gotenks are in the hyperbolic time chamber, and they were fighting against, well, mostly Gotenks was, and he was just spectating, and then he was, spectating again when they got out of the hyperbolic time chamber. Then Gohan steps in. Gohan tries to fight against Super Buu, and then he gets absorbed. Piccolo and Gotenks and Gohan all get absorbed by Super Buu, and then Vegito comes and does his thing, and then, Kid Buu emerges because everybody's expelled from Super Buu's body. And then, they're fighting, and Dragon Balls are used to summon everybody back to life. Um, and then Goku's like, I need your energy so I can, put this guy to rest, put him to sleep, kill this motherfucker real quick. And everybody put their hands up and added, energy to the Super Spirit Bomb. And then he threw it at Boo, and then, other things, and, Majin Buu got destroyed. He was destroyed, but then he got reincarnated eventually. But then Dragon Ball Super happened, and Dragon Ball Super, you know, he senses again, because Piccolo is a guy that can sense, these enemies and knows when something's wrong. These other people are like kind of oblivious to shit, but then he's like, something about this guy is different. Vegeta's acting very strange, not how he usually does. You know, trying to make sure everything's good for this guy, trying to like not say the wrong things. He's like, what? You know, Vegeta's usually not like that. You know, and he found out that that guy is the god of destruction. He, tried to hold down against Beerus, but then he found out he wasn't, like that. Because Beerus is a god of destruction, the most powerful being in the universe besides the angel Whis. And then he fought against Goku, and that happened. And then, the next arc, Frieza got resurrected. And then when Frieza got resurrected, he was like, Frieza, it's Frieza, He fought against Ginyu, and he was able to hold down against Ginyu, all right. But then, Frieza's there, right? Frieza is then, more powerful. And they were like, damn, he must have done some training. And then Goku and Vegeta, Goku mostly, he handled that business. Then, it goes to the tournament, Universe 6 versus Universe 7. Champa versus Beerus for the Super Dragon Ball, the Universal Dragon Balls. The ones that can grant literally any wish. Like, there's no real limitation to these Dragon Balls. That happened, and Piccolo goes into the tournament, but he gets, deceived by Frieza, type of character named Frost, and he gets blinded by him, and he gets defeated. He dropped his guard for a minute. He was like, this guy might not be like Frieza, and then it was like turned out he was actually like Frieza, and he played games. Um, he was defeated in that tournament, and then eventually the tournament of power comes around, and he's there. In this tournament of power, the notable fight I remember him in was when he had to fight against these other Namekians that fused together to create a Super Namekian as well. But they used like fusion, Metamorphin fusion, to do it. So they were actually more powerful when they did that. Um, but Gohan and him were able to defeat those guys. And then, he got sidelined again because Piccolo's not the, most powerful character. Now, after all that shit happens, years later, this is the Dragon Ball superhero movie, the one that's CGI, remember? Piccolo is watching over Pan, which is like his, goddaughter, I guess. I don't know. He's like an uncle to her or something like that. And he's watching over Pan, making sure she's all right. For Gohan, since Gohan's still a bookworm and not, fighting anymore. And Alpha, or no, Gamma 1 and Gamma 2, show up. And then Piccolo's like, okay, damn, I have to fight against these guys. And he was fighting against them, but he actually wished for himself to be more powerful. He had an orange Piccolo form, where he got an orange hue, but then he got bigger. He got a big buff form too from the, you know, transformation, and he was fighting against Gamma One and Gamma Two for a while with Gohan as he was in his mystic form. But then um, Cell Max appears, and when Cell Max appears, that's when Piccolo is like no longer effective, even with his power ups and shit. He's like, damn, this guy is powerful. You know, he goes down, and then that's what fuels Gohan's rage, so he can go into that beast form, white hair and red eyes and shit. That form that's like kind of reminiscent of the time he defeated the real Cell, you know, and then he defeated, Gohan defeated Cell with Piccolo's move called Special Beam Cannon, and yeah, that's where that ends for now. Will Piccolo do anything in the future? Coming, sagas maybe, but probably not because he always gets overshadowed by the Saiyans. But maybe, possibly in the future, Piccolo can get a real dub again. But probably not. He's always just that side character that takes care of it and other stuff. And that's Piccolo. That's the story of Piccolo as of right now. So stay cool on the corner.